Hello again, folks. Chris Temple back with you, and we've got a very unique story today in the critical metals and minerals type area, one that is not very common, which I'll get to in a second. It's one of many stories you're going to hear in a variety of sectors at the upcoming Strategic Investment Insights Conference next weekend, May 6th and 7th at the Lincolnshire Marriott Hotel just outside downtown Chicago. Hop and a skip from O'Hare International Airport. For those of you that haven't done it anyway and want to come, there's still room. Register on the website you see here. Even if you can't make it in person, register, and you will be able, after the conference, to get the recordings of our panel discussions, information on the companies, and so forth. And what's important to understand, and you'll see a video that I did recently setting the table for the whole thing with the conference moderator and kind of chief cook and bottle washer behind the scenes, putting all the pieces together, Eric Redez. We talk about all of the different moving parts really of a rapidly changing world and how we need to get our heads around that as citizens and investors, as consumers and so forth. And a big part of this is that we already had a retreat from globalization underway before Russia invaded Ukraine. That seems to be multiplied tenfold since then. And it's making us all in the US, in Canada, more broadly, I think in the Western Hemisphere, as we learn the hard way to re-embrace the Monroe Doctrine, dust off your history textbooks and look that up. We're going to have to figure out where we're going to get a lot of the things that we need that we're in very short supply of. You don't often think of helium in terms of these substances, but as I've personally gotten belatedly to understand this story a bit better, the dynamics here are every bit as compelling as uranium, let alone lithium and nickel and cobalt and things like that. So joining us today is Andrew Davidson, who is the president and CEO of Royal Helium that is focused on Saskatchewan. Andy, thanks for coming.
Absolutely. Thanks for the time. Pleasure to be here.
You know, I've known Andy for a lot of years, not in this context, unfortunately for me, because I should have jumped on Royal Helium sooner. I'm going to correct that mistake. But Andy has long been part of the consortium of 49 North, Omanika Mining and Metals, which is Omanika is also going to be at the conference coming up. And, you know, he's been with the McNeil family for a long time. You know, as I start again, belatedly, I confess, to learn this story about helium, Andy, I think the helpful thing to set the table for Dean Nawada, who is going to make the presentation on your behalf at the show, is to understand what is there about helium that we should be interested in. How and why is helium one of these critical minerals that we should be concerned about?
Sure. Well, it's there are two ways to approach that: the short answer and the long answer. I'm gonna shoot for the middle and go for the medium length. Helium is, in fact, a critical mineral. It's on the critical minerals list in Canada. It was on the list in the US and likely will again since all the activities in Russia and the Ukraine. It is essentially a high-tech gas and a healthcare gas. So it's used principally in MRI machines in the healthcare side. On the high-tech side, it's used in the manufacture of everything from microchips to semiconductors to fiber optic cables and LCD screens. It's used every day by every person in the developed world. They just don't know it. And that's what makes the story so interesting, is that it's a sleeping giant of an investment idea that's been dominated by 4 major industrial gas companies for the last 80 years. And, wow. And that's starting to change now, and we at Royal are sort of on the leading edge of that change with a handful of other groups, producing helium to fill that need into the high tech and rocketry markets. And rocketry is a particularly interesting subset of helium demand. One of the largest purchasers of helium in North America is NASA,
right?
And SpaceX and the rest. It's just a terrifically interesting industry to be in, and one I could talk about for hours and hours.
Oh, I'm sure you can, and I'm eager to learn. I'm going to be looking forward to Dean and the information that he brings to the table in Chicago. You know, I didn't realize that, unlike some other substances which can be recycled or renewed, that's not the case with helium. And that's part of the reason for the supply issue, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a big part of it. And it's not so much, Chris, that you can't recycle it, it's that it's really tough to contain.
Yeah.
Right. So, as a molecule, it's the second smallest molecule on the periodic table. It simply escapes everything. And due to its inert nature, helium is the only element that will not bond with anything and will not react with anything. So helium stays pure in whatever environment it's in. And being that it's so small and won't bond, it will leak out of virtually anything. And the easiest way to relate this to anyone is think about a helium balloon that you've purchased. Think about it on day one, then think about it on day 5. On day 5, the balloon's on the ground. And that's simply because the helium's escaped the balloon.
Right.
That's it. All that's left in there is air, oxygen. So,
wow.
So that's what makes it challenging. And to the traditional sources of helium in North America, and North America has been a very large producer of it historically, the US specifically. It's produced everywhere as a byproduct of natural gas drilling. So it's contained within natural gas reservoirs in the subsurface, but importantly, it's only contained in conventional natural gas wells. It's not contained in shale, multi-stage frac horizontal wells. Helium is not contained within shale. So the biggest reason for the supply downturn on the North American side has been the depletion of traditional natural gas wells and the shift towards shale gas. So everything that happens, say, in the Marcellus or the Eagle Ford has, not only does it not add helium to the market, it actively depletes it because they're far more economic natural gas wells and people are drilling those as opposed to conventionals. Sure. So that innovation in the natural gas market has been a drain on the helium industry. And
that's one of the reasons
for supply.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why there's these constraints on supply. Your asset, of course, in Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan, again, recently was recognized as the #1 mining jurisdiction on the planet. So a nice place to do business, clearly. And more important, tell us about the nature of this asset that you have and where you are in the exploration and development process.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's Saskatchewan has a unique feature to it in that we produce helium here without hydrocarbons. So it's essentially a green helium. There's no official color grade for helium like there is in hydrogen, but if there was, ours would be green because it's not produced with natural gas. And it's the only place in the world where that happens on any economic scale. And that's more a fluke of geology than anything else. Helium, as you may or may not know, is formed from the decay of uranium and thorium. And you were talking about uranium earlier, and everyone realizes in the commodity industry that Saskatchewan has some of the highest concentrations of uranium in the world.
Yep.
So it is a helium hotbed, but what it also has is stratigraphic traps down deep in the geological column that will hold helium in place. So as we talked about before, how it will move through anything, it will not permeate through shale. And so we have shale caps deep down in our strata that hold helium in place below the levels of organic carbon or traditional hydrocarbon zones.
Wow.
So we produce helium with nitrogen. And nitrogen is another, greenhouse gas inert product, which is simply vented off at surface. So there's no negative impact to helium production in Saskatchewan, which is very unique in North America. And certainly cool. one of the great features of operating in Saskatchewan. Not that we need it. I mean, the wells themselves are economic enough. The grades are high enough globally that we are an ultra competitive region for helium production. The fact that we don't produce hydrocarbons is simply a bonus.
Yeah. Well, and I never really understood until you just said it, Andy, the connection between Saskatchewan being a major uranium player and by extension, necessarily a place where you get some helium. I know that late last year you were at a conference down in Texas and your provincial mining minister went along with you because this province has been a big advocate of this industry specifically because it will bring added helium production back to North America, because it'll get us off of imports and because of the green nature of it. Tell us about what some of the things that they're up to that are helping you out.
Well, they've certainly earned the ranking of #1 jurisdiction in the world. You know, Chris, I've been doing this for a long time in the resource exploration and production game all over the world, and I've simply never seen a scenario like this where the government is so heavily behind one specific industry. Last year, they set a target of Saskatchewan growing to about 10% of global supply coming out of Saskatchewan, and they're putting their money where their mouth is. They've built a large incentive program for explorers and producers to help recoup some of that cost of initial exploration, and especially the cost of building facilities required to, refine or upgrade the helium that comes out of the ground, to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars that are available for these explorers and producers.
So is that,
frankly, sorry, go ahead, Chris.
I'm sorry, is that similar then in the way it works to the federal flow through fund program, or does it augment that?
No, you know what? It's got nothing to do with the flow through provisions.
Okay.
What it is it's direct royalty credits to the province, and the royalty credit system that we have here for helium and oil and gas, for that matter, are transferable credits, which means we can sell them.
Wow.
So there is an active market for them. So for every dollar worth of royalty credits, we sell it on, I guess, what is essentially a gray market for about 95 cents on the dollar. So is helping significantly on the exploration side. For example, our primary project area, we've spent to date around 15 million of the drilling and engineering on that. That is covered under an innovation incentive under this helium action plan. And so we've made our first submission under that plan and are working on the repayment now. And that'll bring as much as $3 to $5 million back into the till. Just through our initial exploration efforts. So,
nothing wrong with that.
No, it's terrific.
Yeah. At what point, Andy, wrapping up, do you think that you're going to be cash flow positive as a company? How many more steps are there?
Well, there's essentially 2 steps left, and we're pretty well halfway through them. The last remaining pieces are actually purchase the helium separation equipment. So we have our facilities that we need have already been engineered, and they're ready for us to push the order button. When we do that, there's a 6 to 9 month lead time for it to be manufactured and delivered to site. Once it's there and assembled on site, it's just pipe in the wells and turn them on. So we're looking end of this year, early Q1 for initial production. And the production is so economic. I mean, we're going to be cash flow positive on day one. One thing I should have mentioned in the preamble is, natural gas sells for about, what is it, $7 today?
About that.
Helium right now is at about $500 US per MCF.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's a pretty significant delta there between MCF of helium versus an MCF of natural gas. So the ability to sell it at prices like that it makes all our wells heavily economic with a payback of 3 to 6 months.
Gosh, once you get going, you hear the cash register ringing from down here.
Yeah, that's right. And so that brings me to step 2 in what we need to monetize, which is actually sign the offtake agreements with the end users or the intermediaries who are going to take the gas from us.
Sure.
And those negotiations are ongoing, and they're just about done.
Cool. Well, I'll tell you again, folks, shame on me for being a little bit slow on the uptake here personally. That's over. You're got a great story in store for you here. Come to the conference, listen to Andy's right-hand man, Dean Nawada, give the presentation of the company. It's a great story. And again, something that by the day recently I've started to understand is way beyond anything I thought it was. And Andy, thanks for augmenting that today. Sorry you won't be able to make it in person, but obviously, as always, we'll keep in touch.
That sounds great, Chris. Thanks for the time.
Yeah, take care.